Hello! In this video, I'm going to give you an introduction to the book of Mark. Now, Mark, like Matthew, Luke, and John, is a book that we call a gospel. It tells the good news of Jesus, the story of Jesus' ministry. So the theme of Mark, probably the biggest idea in the book of Mark, is that Jesus is the suffering servant who fulfills God's plans to save his people. As we read the book of Mark, there's a lot of focus on Jesus' humanity and his suffering. And that provides encouragement for Christians who are reading this book and who are also suffering because they follow Jesus. Mark also places a lot of emphasis on the cross, both the human actions that will cause Jesus' death on the cross, and also on the need for Jesus' crucifixion and God's plan of salvation. There's also a lot of emphasis on discipleship in the book of Mark. Jesus calls his people to follow him, to understand him and imitate him. Now, as you'll read the book of Mark, you'll notice that things move pretty quickly. Mark's got a lot of action and not quite as much a focus on teaching as in other books like it. And Jesus faces a lot of opposition in the book of Mark. And he goes to great lengths to keep others from publicly talking about his identity as the Messiah or the Christ. He does this because they don't yet understand that his mission involves death and then resurrection. So in Mark, like in Matthew and Luke and John, the biggest event is really this suffering and death and resurrection of Jesus. But as you'll read, you'll probably encounter a lot of other stories that may be familiar to you. And a lot of these stories are also in Matthew and in Luke, and a lot of them in John too. So we get stories about Jesus calling his first disciples, Jesus' first acts of healing people who are suffering because of evil spirits or sicknesses. We get Jesus' parable about the sower and the 4 different kinds of soil, Jesus calming the storm, Jesus teaching that being his disciple involves taking up our cross and following him, Jesus blessing the little children, Jesus teaching that the greatest commandments are about loving God with our whole heart and mind and soul and strength, and loving our neighbors as ourselves. So as you expect, the book of Mark is really focused on Jesus. And what we see is that Jesus is the Son of God, who also became the Son of Man. And he did this to give his life for our salvation. So for us, what we see in the book of Mark is that we should be ready to suffer for Jesus in our journey of faith and service. So that's a brief orientation to the book of Mark, some things that you can look for as you read, and some things that you can also keep in your mind as you're going through and reading this. I hope that you enjoy reading the book of Mark. And as always, if you have any questions, anything you'd like to talk about, please feel free to reach out to me. Happy reading!